Flight attendant doubts black woman, belongs in first class, regrets it when she calls her lawyer. Imagine settling into your seat in first class, excited for a long-awaited trip, only to be met with suspicious glares and whispered assumptions. In today's story, we follow a successful black woman who dared to claim what she rightfully paid for, and the flight attendant who didn't think she belonged. Tensions soar at 30,000 feet when prejudice collides with reality. The explosive outcome? A dramatic confrontation that ends in more than just a simple apology. When the woman calls her lawyer, the flight attendant quickly realizes the consequences of her unfounded doubts. Brace yourselves for twists, turns, and a hearty dose of karma. The hustle and bustle of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport pulsed like a living organism, carrying travelers from gate to gate in a steady surge of energy. Overhead, announcements reverberated across the tall ceilings, merging with the shuffle of suitcases and the chatter of families reuniting, business people in a hurry, and vacationers caught somewhere between excitement and exhaustion. People hurried to find their flights, huddled around phones to confirm departure times, and sipped overpriced coffee from small stalls that dotted the concourses. At Gate 12, Delta Airlines Flight 789 was preparing for final boarding. It was a Tuesday evening, a somewhat slow time, except for those catching flights home after a weekend business trip. Among the passengers in the waiting area was Vanessa Coleman, a poised and successful financial consultant traveling to Seattle for an important client meeting. Her mission was straightforward: land, pitch her proposals, and solidify new partnerships that would catapult her firm's latest initiatives into the national spotlight. Vanessa was a tall, striking black woman in her early 30s. Her hair was styled in a neat, professional bun, and she wore a tailored navy blue pantsuit that accentuated her confidence. She had upgraded to first class partly because she had the miles, partly because she valued comfort during the nearly 5-hour flight. This was far from the first time she would sit up front. She had worked hard to earn every bit of success that allowed her this privilege. Normally, traveling first class signaled that one had arrived in more ways than one. Yet Vanessa had encountered subtle hints in the past that some people still questioned her place there. She was braced for any such vibe, but she hoped this trip would be uneventful. Across the waiting area, a flight attendant named Karen Townsend glanced around with a practiced eye. She'd just finished helping an elderly couple confirm their seats, and her gaze flickered over to Vanessa. Karen had a hint of tension in her brow, a habit she hadn't quite mastered to hide. She was known to be strict about rules and procedures by the book, as many of her co-workers said. Yet her approach sometimes included a subtle, deeper bias she might not even admit to herself. When boarding commenced for first class, Vanessa stepped forward, scanned her boarding pass, and strolled down the jetway with calm, confident strides. Karen Townsend was at the aircraft door, greeting passengers. Something in Karen's demeanor shifted the moment. Vanessa passed her. Her polite smile tensed, as if uncertain whether Vanessa truly belonged up front. Nevertheless, the moment passed unremarked, and both women hoped for a smooth flight ahead. Vanessa found her seat 2A, by the window, arranged her things, and settled in with a sigh of relief. Traveling was a routine part of her life, but she relished these moments of quiet, even in a busy cabin. Looking out the window at the twinkling city lights, she felt a surge of gratitude. She thought briefly of her late father, who had always encouraged her to reach beyond limitations. "Do your best, then do even better," he used to say. Vanessa took a deep breath, feeling the usual pang of missing him, then smiled softly at the memory. In the galley, Karen busied herself with final checks, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. She decided to do a quick seat verification before takeoff, something flight attendants sometimes do to ensure everyone is in the correct cabin. While such checks are routine, her inclination to double-check seat 2A was more personal. The other flight attendants were oblivious to Karen's subtle fixation. They each had assigned tasks, cross-checking the cabin door, verifying overhead bin closures, and ensuring no one had unauthorized items in the aisles. Meanwhile, the pilots were finishing their pre-flight checklists, radioing the tower for final clearance. It was nearly time to shut the boarding door and prepare for pushback. The flight would be about 4.5 hours, weather permitting. Vanessa noticed Karen moving down the aisle, scanning passengers. She glanced up, meeting Karen's eyes. The flight attendant's lips parted, maybe in greeting or perhaps in silent judgment. Vanessa wasn't sure which. After a brief pause, Karen broke eye contact and moved on. Vanessa thought nothing of it, initially just a fleeting moment. Maybe Karen was just being thorough. But that quick moment was only the beginning of a chain of events that would lead to an onboard confrontation, legal phone calls, and an unexpected karmic twist that no one, least of all Karen Townsend, saw coming. Once all passengers were seated, the door was closed and the aircraft rolled away from the gate. The flight attendants went through their safety demonstrations. Karen performed her part near the front aisle with mechanical precision, every gesture memorized from years of practice. Yet, her mind kept drifting to seat 2A. She continued to steal glances as if trying to confirm some suspicion. Vanessa had her laptop out, doing a quick review of her presentation slides. She barely noticed Karen's repeated looks. She was focused on last-minute adjustments, ensuring her slides were polished and persuasive. Her job was to pitch new financial strategies to a tech startup in Seattle, and she wanted to shine. Her success could lead to a promotion, possibly even a partnership. Her hard work was paying off. The plane ascended into the Atlanta night sky, leaving behind the labyrinth of airport terminals. Once the seatbelt sign turned off, the flight attendants began the usual first-class service, distributing hot towels, taking drink orders, and offering small plates of dinner. Karen approached Vanessa's seat with a tray. She had a forced smile on her face, equal parts politeness and latent suspicion. Vanessa welcomed the service with a polite nod. "Thank you," she said, returning Karen's smile, but the flight attendant paused for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Vanessa, adept at reading people from years of dealing with boardroom politics, sensed an undertone. Karen's gaze flicked over Vanessa's designer laptop bag, then to her outfit, then down to her seat assignment again, as though still verifying. "Can I help you with anything else?" Karen asked, her voice betraying the slightest edge. "No, I'm all set," Vanessa replied, raising an eyebrow. "Appreciate it." Karen moved on, but whatever was going on in her mind wouldn't let up. She murmured something to a colleague who was busy plating another passenger's dinner. The colleague merely nodded absently, not grasping the significance of Karen's remarks. Soon Karen found herself drifting back towards seat 2A as if magnetized. "Ma'am," Karen asked, with a carefully composed voice, once the meal service was in progress, "would you mind letting me see your boarding pass?" Vanessa looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "My boarding pass?" "Yes," Karen repeated. "We're verifying cabin placements to ensure everyone is in the correct seat." It wasn't entirely unusual to ask, but doing so specifically in first class for a passenger who had already boarded without any known issue raised a suspicious red flag. Vanessa felt her pulse quicken. She was used to microaggressions in professional settings, but it still caught her off guard each time. The dull ache of frustration and a flash of anger gripped her. Keeping her composure, Vanessa reached for her purse, pulled out the boarding pass, and handed it over. Karen studied it for an uncomfortably long moment. "Okay," she murmured, sounding reluctant, as though it somehow contradicted her expectations. "Thank you." Vanessa exhaled, forcibly calming herself. She decided not to let one awkward moment dictate the entire flight. She put on her noise-cancelling headphones and tried to refocus on her work. The cabin lights dimmed, and for a short while, the plane hummed along without incident. Yet, Karen's mind would not let the matter rest. Something about Vanessa being in first class struck her as questionable, though she had no real reason for it. Her bias, perhaps unacknowledged, was weaving a narrative in her head. Maybe Vanessa was using someone else's points. Perhaps she was an employee pass rider. Maybe she was an upgrade at the last-minute type who wasn't legitimately a first-class passenger. Ridiculous as it sounded, Karen convinced herself that she was simply doing her job by double-checking. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in a crisp grey suit had been casually observing the interaction. He caught Vanessa's eye at one point and gave a small, empathetic shrug. He too had sensed Karen's attitude, but wasn't sure how to intervene. Vanessa offered a tight smile in return, appreciating the unspoken support. As the flight progressed, dinner trays were cleared and the cabin lights were lowered further to allow passengers to rest. Vanessa tried to relax. She scrolled through her phone, checking a few messages, thankful that in-flight Wi-Fi was letting her stay in touch with her team. She typed out instructions to her assistant, ensuring that her arrival itinerary in Seattle would be smooth. Karen, meanwhile, paced the aisle. She checked seatbelts, collected trash, and continued scanning the faces of the first-class passengers. Her gaze landed on Vanessa again and again, each time narrowing as though seeking evidence of wrongdoing. The more Karen allowed her biases to simmer, the more she convinced herself that something was amiss. Finally, Karen cornered a junior flight attendant, Bella, near the galley. "Have you noticed anything? Off with that woman in 2A?" she asked, in a hushed tone. Bella blinked, confused. "Off? No, not really." Karen pursed her lips. "She's traveling alone, but the ticket says Miss Coleman. I just want to be sure she's who she says she is." Bella's eyebrows rose. "She had a valid boarding pass, right? We scanned it at the gate." Karen nodded but didn't back down. "Sometimes you never know if they borrowed it from someone else at the last minute. I heard stories about boarding pass swaps to get into first class." Bella's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "If she has her ID and the boarding pass matched at the gate, that seems fine. Don't think it's our place to do more." But Karen was persistent. "I'll keep an eye on her, just in case." Bella hesitated, then shrugged. She didn't want conflict with a senior flight attendant, so she let the matter drop. Meanwhile, Vanessa could sense the tension. She caught glimpses of Karen whispering, noticed pointed glances thrown in her direction. The atmosphere shifted from restful to uneasy. One side of her wanted to confront Karen, call it out right then and there, but she checked herself. There was a time and place for everything, and confronting a biased flight attendant in mid-air might escalate into a scene she did not want. For the next hour, Vanessa tried to let it go. She played a puzzle game on her phone, read a few chapters of a new novel, and even tried to nap. She told herself she would lodge a formal complaint after landing. That might be enough to handle the issue. Yet, fate had other plans, for Karen's suspicions would soon lead to a confrontation far more dramatic than a polite complaint at the customer service desk. A little more than halfway through the flight, the seatbelt sign dinged back on. Turbulence shook the cabin lightly, and the captain instructed everyone to remain seated. Flight attendants took a seat in their jump seats. Vanessa, awakened from a short nap by the jostling, felt her stomach flip. She steadied herself, fastening her seatbelt. Karen strapped in as well, but her eyes never left seat 2A. After a few minutes of mild turbulence, the plane leveled out, and the captain announced that the seatbelt sign would remain on for a bit longer. Once the rocking calmed, Karen stood up and made her way toward Vanessa. Her conversation with Bella had only fueled her suspicions further. Vanessa took a deep breath, noticing Karen's approach. "Yes?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. Karen crossed her arms. "Ma'am, I have a few additional questions about your seat. Are you sure you booked seat 2A? Vanessa's expression turned perplexed. "You've already seen my boarding pass. It clearly states 2A. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I know, but we've had some inconsistencies with frequent flyer miles. It's possible there was a mix-up. Could I see the credit card you used to purchase your ticket?" That was a jarring request. Vanessa felt her temperature rise. She'd traveled countless times and never had a flight attendant asked her to produce a credit card mid-flight. "Excuse me? That's highly unusual. In fact, I don't think you have the authority to demand that." Karen's jaw tensed. "We can verify your details, ma'am. If there's a discrepancy, we need to address it." Vanessa's eyebrows shot up. She removed her noise-cancelling headphones, fully alert now. Her voice was tinged with anger, though she tried to remain composed. "Is there a specific reason you suspect me of not belonging in this seat? Or do you ask every first-class passenger for their credit card mid-flight?" Karen's cheeks reddened, caught between her bias and the realization that she was crossing a line. "I'm not singling anyone out. We just have to be certain," Vanessa cut in, her patience strained to the breaking point. "I'm certain you're violating my privacy. And quite frankly, this is harassment." She could feel eyes turning toward them. The middle-aged businessman across the aisle was openly staring now, a look of disbelief on his face. Karen cleared her throat. "Ma'am, please calm down. I'm just following protocol." Vanessa let out a cold laugh. "There is no protocol that says you demand a passenger's credit card during the flight. Your gate agents already matched my ID to my ticket, and you verified my boarding pass. If there's an issue, you can call the gate or look into your airline's passenger manifest." In the silence that followed, it became obvious that Karen had no official ground to stand on. She glanced around, noticing that other passengers were listening. Her colleague Bella had walked up, having overheard raised voices. Bella tried to diffuse the situation. "Ma'am, everything's fine here. We're sorry for any inconvenience." She shot Karen a look that said, "Drop it." But Karen was too far in now, her pride fueling her determination. Vanessa unbuckled her seatbelt slightly, leaning forward just a bit. "I'm going to say this plainly. I paid for this seat with my own money, which I earned from my own business. I have the receipts, the emails, and everything else if you really want to see them. But the only time I'll show them is if your supervisor or the authorities request it. Not you." Karen took a half step back. "There's no need to be hostile, ma'am." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Hostility? You've singled me out, demanded personal information, and implied that I don't belong here. Let me be absolutely clear. If you continue this line of questioning, you'll hear from my lawyer before this plane even lands." Those words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Karen, visibly rattled, turned on her heel and stormed off toward the galley. Bella, uncertain, offered a small, apologetic nod to Vanessa before following. Vanessa sat back, heart pounding. She was furious, but also shaken. She'd experienced discrimination before, but not often so brazenly. The man across the aisle leaned toward her, whispering, "I'm really sorry you're going through this. If you need a witness, I'm happy to help." Vanessa smiled appreciatively, exhaling a tremulous breath. "Thank you. Let's hope it doesn't come to that." The heated exchange between Karen and Vanessa had not gone unnoticed by the rest of first class. In fact, a few passengers in the rows behind had witnessed the confrontation, whispering among themselves. Some were outraged on Vanessa's behalf. A woman with a teenage daughter was particularly upset. She whispered to the young girl, "This is why we speak up about bias, honey. This is unacceptable." The teenager nodded, eyes wide, absorbing a real-life lesson in discrimination. Karen retreated to the galley and began a frenzied conversation with Bella. She threatened to call her lawyer. "This is getting out of hand," Karen hissed, trying to keep her voice low. Bella, more level-headed, shook her head. "It's out of hand because you're pushing an issue that shouldn't exist in the first place. She's got the valid ticket. We have no reason to bother her." Karen frowned, unwilling to accept Bella's reasoning. "Fine," she muttered. "Let's just serve the rest of the cabin and get this flight over with." While Karen wrestled with her conscience, or perhaps just her anger, Vanessa decided to document the incident. She typed out notes on her phone, carefully recording times and the substance of each interaction. She knew the value of meticulous records if she decided to file a complaint or even a lawsuit. Her father, an attorney before he passed away, had taught her the importance of building a thorough case. When Bella and another attendant resumed drink service, multiple passengers made supportive comments to Bella, voicing that they were uncomfortable with how Vanessa had been treated. Bella nodded, powerless to reverse what had already transpired, but wanting to convey empathy. Vanessa kept an eye on Karen. She could see the internal conflict on the flight attendant's face. Perhaps Karen was beginning to realize how far out of line she had gone, or maybe she was formulating new justifications. For the moment, though, Karen avoided seat 2A, focusing on other areas of the cabin. As the flight wore on, Vanessa struck up conversations with a few passengers nearby who had witnessed everything. She found solidarity in their outrage, which comforted her. She told them she intended to file a complaint. The middle-aged businessman, a lawyer himself, it turned out, offered her his card. "If you need someone to back you up or even represent you, let me know," he said with genuine concern. Vanessa thanked him. While she had her own legal resources, she'd already made up her mind to call attorney Cassandra Whitman. A well-known civil rights attorney and a close friend, she appreciated the sentiment. It reaffirmed that not everyone in the world was going to side with prejudice. Meanwhile, Karen tried to maintain a facade of professionalism. She avoided further confrontations with Vanessa, focusing on other duties. Each minute felt like an hour, the tension thick enough to taste. In her mind, she rehearsed what she might say if confronted by a supervisor, or if Vanessa really did file a complaint. Yet, fate had another twist in store for Karen Townsend, one that would leave her cornered in a way she never imagined. After what felt like an eternal flight to everyone involved, the captain announced the initial descent into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The flaps on the wings adjusted, and the city lights below became visible through the windows. Passengers stowed their laptops and personal items, preparing for landing. Vanessa secured her bag beneath the seat, all the while replaying the night's events in her head. She glanced toward the galley. Karen was strapped into her jump seat, face set like stone. The seatbelt sign illuminated. Soft music played overhead, the turbulence returning as the plane cut through layers of cloud. Vanessa felt a sense of relief that they would soon be on the ground, able to properly address what had happened. Upon touchdown, the cabin jolted with the landing gear's contact. The engines roared in reverse thrust, slowing the aircraft. Passengers were flung slightly forward in their seats. As they taxied to the gate, the tension in the air refused to dissipate. The captain turned off the seatbelt sign, and the usual flurry of movement erupted. Passengers stood to collect their belongings from the overhead bins. People murmured about connections, dinner plans, or simply the relief of arriving. Vanessa remained seated for a moment, letting the rush pass. She also wanted to see if Karen would say anything, an apology or a final remark. Karen unlocked her jump seat belt and watched Vanessa from across the aisle. Their eyes met for a split second, a silent standoff of sorts. Neither spoke. Vanessa shook her head slightly, as if to say, "This isn't over." Karen swallowed hard, turning her gaze away. As soon as the door to the aircraft opened, Vanessa made her way out of first class, head held high. Bella was there, along with another attendant, telling passengers to have a good night. Bella caught Vanessa's arm gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her expression earnest. I wish this didn't happen." Vanessa nodded, offering a grateful, albeit weary, smile. "Thank you," she replied, stepping onto the jetway. She felt a swirl of emotions, anger, humiliation, and a lingering sadness that such incidents were still a part of her reality. The man across the aisle, the business lawyer, caught up to her, handing her his business card once more. "Don't hesitate," he reminded her. "Stand up for yourself." Vanessa accepted the card with a courteous smile, though she already knew her next steps. She had legal backup of her own. She'd call her friend, attorney Cassandra Whitman, as soon as she reached the rideshare area. The bustle of Seattle-Tacoma International at night offered little comfort. Neon lights illuminated sleek floors, and travelers from various flights merged in hallways and escalators. Some were bleary-eyed and trudging along, others were re-energized at the prospect of arriving in a new city. Vanessa quickly made her way to the baggage claim, retrieved her carry-on that had been gate-checked due to a lack of overhead space, and headed to find ground transportation. She found a quiet spot near a row of empty seats. Opening her phone, she dialed Cassandra Whitman's number. Cassandra was not only a formidable civil rights attorney, but also a dear friend from Vanessa's college days. Vanessa had supported Cassandra through law school, cheering her on during the toughest exams. Cassandra, in turn, had always offered Vanessa legal advice whenever the financial consultant found herself confronted with unfairness or discrimination in the corporate world. The phone rang twice before Cassandra answered. "Vanessa, you must have landed. How was your flight?" Vanessa swallowed hard. "Cassandra, I need your help. Something happened on the plane." She detailed the story, starting from Karen's suspicious stares to the demand to see her credit card, and finally the threat about calling a lawyer. Cassandra listened quietly, her tone taking on a steely edge the moment she realized how deeply her friend had been wronged. "This is beyond unprofessional," Cassandra said. "It's harassment. Maybe even a civil rights violation, especially if it's racially motivated. I'll need details, names, times, everything you have." Vanessa pulled out her phone notes. "I documented the entire incident. I also have some witnesses who offered to speak on my behalf." Cassandra's voice was resolute. "Good. We'll start by filing a formal complaint with Delta Airlines. We'll request internal investigations and demand an apology, possibly compensation. If they brush us off, we take it further." Vanessa exhaled, relief flooding her. "Thank you. I'll forward all the info as soon as I get to my hotel. Let me know next steps. I have to get to a client meeting tomorrow morning, but I'll do whatever's necessary." They said their goodbyes, and as Vanessa ended the call, she felt the tension in her shoulders dissipate slightly. Knowing that Cassandra was in her corner gave her strength and confidence that justice would be pursued. Whether Karen Townsend realized it or not, a formidable legal wave was heading her way. Karen Townsend had hoped that once the flight ended, everything would just blow over. She'd considered apologizing, but her pride prevented it. Instead, she went through her usual post-flight checklist, wanting only to clock out and head to her crew hotel. But the unsettled feeling in her stomach refused to go away. Sure enough, within 48 hours, Karen was called into the office of her immediate supervisor, Daniel Hendricks. Daniel, a level-headed manager who had been at Delta for over a decade, had already received multiple passenger complaints about Karen's conduct, including a scathing email from Vanessa Coleman herself. More troubling was the knowledge that a civil rights attorney was now involved. Karen walked into Daniel's office, her uniform neat, her expression guarded. She tried to project confidence, but her anxiety was palpable. Daniel motioned for her to sit. On his desk lay several sheets of paper, presumably passenger statements and the official complaint from Vanessa. "I've got a serious matter to discuss with you," Daniel began. "There's been a formal complaint filed against you, alleging discriminatory behavior, harassment, and inappropriate demands made of a first-class passenger. Miss Coleman is also threatening legal action." Karen pressed her lips together. She tried to sound composed. "I was following protocol. I was just verifying her seat." Daniel frowned. Demanding someone's credit card mid-flight is not protocol. The gate staff and our digital systems already verify that. And the passenger claims you repeatedly singled her out. Karen's defense wavered. She had no legitimate answer that wouldn't sound like an admission of bias. "I might have been overly cautious, but I didn't mean anything discriminatory." Daniel consulted the papers on his desk. Passengers who witnessed the incident describe your tone and demeanor as accusatory. One passenger stated, "You seem to imply Miss Coleman couldn't afford to be in first class." Karen's face reddened. "That's not what I said. I was just..." Daniel lifted a hand. "The bottom line, this has escalated to a point where our legal team is involved. Miss Coleman's attorney has already sent a preliminary notice. We have to investigate. You're suspended until further notice, pending the outcome." Karen's eyes widened. "Suspended? For how long?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't have an exact timeline. But it's serious, Karen. With the brand reputation at stake and multiple witness accounts, I can't see this going away easily." Karen felt the world closing in around her. She'd never faced suspension before, never had so much as a formal reprimand in her file. She tried to form a protest, but words failed her. Finally, she exhaled a shaky breath. "I understand." But as she left Daniel's office, a mixture of panic and indignation set in. She couldn't believe that one passenger, someone she deemed suspicious, could derail her career so swiftly. Yet, the facts were stacking up against her. The real question for Karen was whether she had the humility to own her mistake, or would she dig herself deeper into denial. Meanwhile, Vanessa was settling into her Seattle trip. Her pitch meeting went remarkably well, and she secured the partnership deal her firm needed. That victory felt slightly hollow, though, overshadowed by the emotional toll of the flight incident. Nevertheless, she maintained her professionalism, juggling her day job responsibilities while coordinating with Cassandra. Cassandra had wasted no time. She drafted a formal complaint, citing relevant federal regulations about non-discrimination in public accommodations. Airlines, though regulated differently than typical establishments, are still subject to certain anti-discrimination laws. Cassandra also highlighted how the flight attendant's specific actions, demanding to see a credit card and repeatedly questioning Vanessa's presence, pointed to discriminatory intent. In a separate letter to Delta's legal team, Cassandra demanded a written apology to Vanessa, a thorough internal investigation, and assurances that future training would address bias. She hinted that, should Delta fail to respond adequately, a lawsuit might be filed in federal court, seeking damages for emotional distress and reputational harm. The letters were precise, professional, and carried the unmistakable weight of a serious legal threat. Cassandra made sure to mention that multiple passengers had offered to testify. She attached anonymized statements from 3 of them, who confirmed Karen's behavior and expressed support for Vanessa. Within days, Delta's legal counsel responded. They assured Cassandra that the matter was under investigation, that Miss Coleman's complaint was taken seriously, and that they would respond more fully once they had concluded their internal review. Cassandra relayed the update to Vanessa, who was satisfied to see that her grievance wasn't being dismissed out of hand. Delta's internal review team interviewed Karen Townsend, Bella, the other flight attendants, and any passengers who responded to the airline's inquiry. The stories painted a damning picture for Karen. While Bella tried to downplay the drama, Not wanting to throw Karen entirely under the bus, her statement still confirmed that Karen had asked to see Vanessa's credit card and had shown unusual suspicion. Other passengers, feeling no loyalty to Karen, described the scene in vivid detail. Some used words like targeted and biased, leaving little ambiguity about how they perceived Karen's behavior. The review team also went through flight records, verifying that Vanessa's ticket, frequent flyer status, and seat assignment were perfectly legitimate. The conclusion was inevitable. Karen had overstepped, violating Delta's customer service policies and possibly incurring legal liabilities. A senior executive in charge of ethics and compliance recommended disciplinary action, possibly termination. However, the final decision would rest on a meeting of Delta's management, HR, and legal teams. They considered various factors: Karen's years of service, her past record, the magnitude of the complaint, and the potential lawsuit from Vanessa. They also had to weigh the PR impact. A discrimination lawsuit would be explosive, especially if it went public. During this time, Cassandra kept Vanessa informed. They'll likely try to settle, Cassandra surmised. They want to avoid negative press. But we won't settle for a token apology, Vanessa. We'll push for real accountability. Vanessa appreciated Cassandra's proactive stance. Still, she had mixed feelings. Part of her just wanted a sincere apology and a commitment to better training, so no one else would endure what she did. Another part of her felt that the only language big corporations understand is legal or financial consequences. As days turned into weeks, Karen's suspension continued. At first, she tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. She told her husband she was on an extended break, but eventually, the truth came out. Her husband was supportive, but worried. He saw Karen's stress levels spike. She was restless, awaiting a decision, fearful. She might lose the career she'd built over many years. Karen even considered reaching out to Vanessa to apologize personally, but her pride stopped her. She also worried that such a move might be seen as an admission of guilt, or worse, that it might inflame the legal situation. Instead, she confided in a few flight attendant friends who offered lukewarm sympathy. Some believed Karen had indeed gone too far, while others blamed passenger entitlement. Still, no one could deny that Karen was in hot water. At one point, Karen called Bella to see how the investigation was going. Bella's reply was cautious. "I told them the truth, Karen. You were suspicious. You asked for the credit card. I couldn't lie." Karen felt a wave of frustration and betrayal, but she knew Bella was just being honest. "I understand," she replied, her voice tight. "Let's just hope it works out." After hanging up, Karen sank onto her sofa, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold on the table. She had a sinking feeling that her future with Delta might be over. For years, she'd prided herself on being a dedicated professional, seeing herself as someone who upheld rules and standards. Now, she was forced to confront the possibility that her rigid approach and perhaps underlying biases had ruined her career. Eventually, Delta's legal team concluded their investigation. They reached out to Cassandra, indicating they wished to discuss a potential resolution. Cassandra arranged a teleconference that included her, Vanessa, a senior Delta legal counsel, and an HR representative. The flight attendant union, though not specifically representing Karen, had a general representative on the line as well. During the call, the Delta counsel apologized to Vanessa on behalf of the airline. He stated that they take claims of discrimination very seriously and that appropriate disciplinary measures would be taken against the employee in question. He offered Vanessa compensation in the form of a flight credit and a modest sum of money for her troubles. He also assured that the airline would provide additional training for flight attendants on implicit bias and cultural sensitivity. Cassandra, speaking on Vanessa's behalf, took notes and listened attentively. The offer was a start, but not enough. "We appreciate the acknowledgement," Cassandra said, "but Miss Coleman has endured emotional distress and public humiliation. We want to ensure that such incidents don't happen again to her or anyone else. We'd like a stronger commitment, including a more significant settlement and an explicit statement that Miss Coleman was in no way at fault." The Delta Council took a deep breath. "We're open to discussing a higher settlement figure. We are also prepared to ensure that the flight attendant in question faces disciplinary action. We can confirm that her employment has been terminated or will be soon, depending on the final HR decision." Vanessa felt a jolt of mixed emotions at the word terminated. Part of her felt it was just, given how Karen had treated her. Another part felt a pang of empathy. She knew job loss was serious. But justice, she reminded herself, had to come with accountability. Cassandra steered the conversation toward finalizing details, requesting a formal letter of apology signed by a high-level Delta executive, along with a public statement acknowledging the incident in general terms, without naming Vanessa. The Delta Council promised to get back with final numbers and terms. By the end of the call, the framework of a settlement was in place. It felt like a victory, albeit a bittersweet one. Karen was officially terminated from Delta Airlines 2 days after that teleconference. She received a letter stating that her conduct was found to be in violation of the company's code of ethics, specifically citing discriminatory harassment. Further, her actions had opened the airline to substantial legal risk. Karen was devastated. She felt the floor drop out from under her life. In a final conversation with her now former supervisor, Daniel Hendricks, Karen pleaded for some form of lesser punishment, maybe demotion or mandatory retraining. But the decision had already been made at higher levels. "I'm sorry, Karen," Daniel said, not unkindly. The evidence and the witness accounts were very clear. The legal team recommended termination. Karen hung up with a tearful goodbye. She sat on her front porch for hours, staring at the sunset. Anger, shame, regret, they all warred inside her. Part of her wanted to blame Vanessa for overreacting. Another part knew that she had indeed harassed the woman unjustly. She recalled her initial suspicion, how she'd latched onto an unspoken bias that a young black woman in first class might be out of place. That small kernel of bias had ballooned into a confrontation, and now the collapse of her professional life. All her training, the flights she'd staffed, the colleagues she'd befriended gone. She felt the sting of what she perceived as karma hitting back. She'd read stories of people who faced consequences after discriminating against someone. She never dreamed she'd be in that category. Yet here she was, jobless, with a black mark on her employment record that might be impossible to erase. In the weeks following the incident, the legal dance between Cassandra Whitman and Delta's corporate counsel intensified, punctuated by multiple conference calls, emailed briefs, and carefully worded statements. Cassandra brought her A game, methodically laying out every instance of wrongdoing and pointing to the clear evidence of bias. Vanessa, meanwhile, juggled her demanding work schedule with the emotional toll of reliving the ordeal, recounting the flight, collecting passenger statements, and signing paperwork that detailed every uncomfortable nuance of Karen Townsend's behavior. Despite the tension, a sense of cautious optimism grew each time Vanessa and Cassandra spoke. Cassandra's approach was both forceful and measured, making it clear that if Delta did not address Vanessa's concerns to their fullest extent, a public lawsuit would be the next step. Eager to avoid a storm of bad press and potential legal damages, Delta's legal team became increasingly cooperative, though they approached each negotiation session with the meticulous caution of seasoned litigators. Finally, after several rounds of back and forth, Delta Airlines presented a settlement offer. In addition to a confidential monetary award Meant to compensate for Vanessa's emotional distress and the humiliation she faced, Delta agreed to issue a formal apology signed by two high-level executives within the company, one from the Customer Relations Department and another from Corporate Diversity and Inclusion. This was a particularly crucial win for Vanessa. While the financial payout was meaningful, the recognition of wrongdoing and a genuine apology carried deeper weight in her eyes. But Cassandra was not finished. Beyond the personal remedy, she insisted on systemic change within the airline. The final agreement stipulated that Delta would implement a new, enhanced training curriculum for all customer-facing employees, from gate agents to flight attendants. This training would specifically address implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, and microaggressions. Importantly, it would also emphasize real-life scenarios, including the possibility of a passenger being singled out because of race, attire, or assumptions about financial status. Cassandra wanted to ensure that no other traveler would endure the same experience Vanessa had. When the negotiated terms were officially signed, Vanessa felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had stood her ground in a situation many others might have brushed off or felt too intimidated to challenge. She phoned her mother to share the news. Through tears of pride, her mother said, "Your father would be so proud, Vanessa. He always believed that standing up for what's right matters, no matter how small or big the stage." Those words struck a tender chord in Vanessa's heart. She recognized she was following in her father's footsteps, carrying on his legacy of courage and truth. News of the settlement spread quickly among Vanessa's friends and family, and many urged her to share her story publicly. Vanessa chose to post a measured account on her social media platforms. She refrained from naming Karen Townsend directly, focusing instead on highlighting the positive outcome of broader corporate changes, the training commitments from Delta, and the significance of refusing to accept discrimination in any form. To her surprise, the post went viral within days. Scores of people both within and beyond her professional network commented to show their support. Some shared their own experiences of being stereotyped or unfairly treated while traveling. Others simply applauded Vanessa's bravery, stating that her story gave them the confidence to speak up in their own lives. The avalanche of responses carried mixed emotions for Vanessa. On the one hand, she felt validated and encouraged. On the other, it saddened her to see how many people had faced similar injustices. Still, she clung to the hope that each voice added to the chorus would make it harder for such incidents to go ignored. Her day-to-day life gradually returned to normalcy, consulting for high-profile clients, traveling for meetings, and landing new contracts. Each time she booked another flight, though, she couldn't help but feel a pinch of worry, a remnant of the emotional residue from the Karen Townsend incident. But the knowledge that she had made even a small dent in a system that often overlooked or dismissed these problems buoyed her spirits. She was determined to remain vigilant, ready to push for even greater progress if the need arose. At a celebratory dinner with Cassandra, Vanessa expressed her gratitude. "You fought for me when I wasn't sure I had the strength to do it alone. Thank you for being the friend and attorney I needed." Cassandra lifted her glass. "Here's to you never doubting your strength again," she said, smiling. "And here's to all the people who'll benefit because you chose to stand up instead of stand down." In that moment, Vanessa recalled her father's guiding principle: do your best, then do even better. She realized she had indeed done her best in a difficult situation, and with Cassandra's help, that best had translated into measurable change. It was a victory not just for herself, but for anyone who might one day sit in seat 2, confident in the knowledge they had every right to be there. Not every story has a neat, happy ending for everyone involved, For Karen Townsend, the consequences were real and painful. She had to explain to future employers why she left Delta, and that question inevitably led to revelations about her termination. The airline industry is tight-knit, word travels fast. She found it nearly impossible to land a similar role. Perhaps the biggest twist came when Karen took a step back and decided to confront her biases head-on. She enrolled in a local community center's program on anti-discrimination and cultural awareness, partly out of genuine introspection and partly to show prospective employers she was working on her flaws. She often felt resentment bubble up, but somewhere deep inside, she acknowledged that she needed to change. Would Karen have embarked on that journey without losing her job? Possibly not. Sometimes, the harsh hand of karma or consequence is the only catalyst for personal growth. Only time would tell if Karen's transformation would be lasting or if she would harbor permanent bitterness toward Vanessa. The seeds of empathy had been planted at least. Vanessa, for her part, focused on the future. She continued to break barriers in her field, forging strong partnerships, earning accolades, and lifting other young professionals, especially women of color, who followed in her footsteps. If she could create ripples of change in the airline industry, she hoped to do the same everywhere. Her career took her. And so, the story of Flight Attendant Doubt's Black Woman belongs in First Class Regrets, It When She Calls Her Lawyer, drew to a close with significant lessons on prejudice, accountability, and the power of standing up for oneself. In the end, the flight attendant who believed she was just following protocol learned how easily a seemingly small act of bias could spiral into a life-altering ordeal. Meanwhile, the woman who dared to claim her rightful seat discovered a voice stronger than she ever realized, a voice that resonated far beyond the confines of Seat 2A. And there you have it, a harrowing journey that took flight at 30,000 feet and landed in a legal showdown. When unjust suspicion tested Vanessa Coleman's resolve, she refused to let it slide. Instead, she fought back with the help of a formidable lawyer, turning a painful experience into a catalyst for change. On the other side of the aisle, Karen Townsend learned the steep cost of bias, losing both her job and the respect she once commanded. Ultimately, this story is a reminder that we all share the responsibility to confront prejudice when we see it, and to hold accountable those who perpetuate it. If you found this story insightful or empowering, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support ensures we can continue sharing important stories that inspire personal growth, spark reflection, and hopefully bring about a little more understanding in the world. Thank you for watching.